Zach, we are back and we're talking our favorite dynasty trade targets right now to buy before the season comes around. We are going to get right into it for y'all. We got 5 trade targets coming your way. Before we bring them to you, leave a like on the video, comment down below some of your favorite trade targets and what you thought of these trade targets. If you had these players on your roster, would you sell them to us for these values? We also want to hear from you in the Discord. Head on over to patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in that Discord server for a free 7-day trial. The regular season is peak Discord season. I mean, it's been great. It's been a blast. The offseason, everybody that's, kind of stuck around, and there's people that come and go with the season. We get it. We understand. But in season, Discord is just crazy. So by all means, please get in there. Check it out. Patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in there. Like I said, free 7-day trial. But with that said, Zach, all the promo in the books. Let's get to the content that people came for. Give us your first Dynasty trade target. And this is a package deal. This is a concept, not just one player necessarily that you're targeting. What do you got for your first trade target?
Yeah, something that we've kind of just breadcrumbed on the channel the last few videos, and something that I actually believe in, and it, is quarterback handcuffs. So I'm targeting quarterback handcuffs. Now, look, before I get into all the information I've provided, there are some that don't qualify. Like, I don't know who's backing up Josh Allen. It doesn't matter, but there are important ones that can score you points. And that's really what the point of this is. So we'll get more into that in just a second. But look, the number of starting quarterbacks, Bob, that have missed time due to injury the last 2 seasons was almost identical, 20 in 2023, 19 in 2022. However, quarterbacks last season missed a total of 102 games. In 2022, starting quarterbacks missed 88 games. So that's a 16% increase year over year from 2022 to 2023 in games missed amongst starting quarterbacks. Again, a 16% increase in games missed from starting quarterbacks. In a super flex league, that is a big deal. You have the allotment to start 2 quarterbacks, which I'll give you another solution in a little bit, and somebody we're going to talk about later. But for me, it's very pivotal if I have some quarterbacks, and I'll list them, to have their backups, because I believe that they can give me 50, 60, 70% of the production that the starter can, because of the systems, because of the offense, because of the coach, or even just because of the player. And here's a really good example. And I know this isn't like the craziest example, right? But how many people were counting on J.J. McCarthy, Bob, in their starting lineups this season that don't have Sam Darnold? Do you know how many offers I sent to J.J. McCarthy owners for Sam Darnold? And I would say virtually none of them got accepted. I was probably asking for a second and third swap with Sam Darnold. Sometimes it could have been something different. I can't remember them off the top of my head. But there was, when I was offering those deals, there was the news that Sam Darnold was potentially the starting quarterback. That offer's off the table at this point. And you might be left, 10 days, 2 weeks before the season without a quarterback 2 or a quarterback 3, which, if I'm competing, is an absolute must. So, there's a lot of situations where I have Sam Darnold right now, and I'm very happy about it, because it's either a replacement for J.J. McCarthy, or I can put him on the trade block and see what people are offering, which the offers now are much greater than they were, 10 days ago. So really what I'm looking for here, Bob, is in a superflex format, if I can get safely 10 to 12 points at the second quarterback position. This is not anything crazy, but you risk getting, 5, 6, 7 points, which to me is killer in a super flex spot, because your opponent's probably going to score in the double digits. So I'm looking to get double-digit production here out of my super flex spot. And look, again, super flex doesn't have to be a quarterback, but depending on the start size of every league, when you get to the deeper leagues, it gets harder to find double-digit production if you have a start 11, start 12, so on and so forth. So I'm looking for quarterbacks that when they start can get me 10, 12, 15 points. I feel really, really happy about that. And Bob, somebody that's in a couple of leagues with me, that I practice what I preach with this. This is not like, let me find a point today, let's talk about quarterback handcuffs. No, I do this. And everybody who knows me and is in leagues with me knows that if I have, and I'm going to give you some quarterbacks here, I have their backups. Brock Purdy, I want Josh Dobbs. I was uncertain about him a few weeks ago, but he was the second quarterback in the preseason game just a couple days ago. He's looking pretty good. And let's not forget what he did last year with like 3 different teams. And I know he ultimately got benched, but he still gave you uber production. I mean, we were talking at one point, Josh Dobbs was getting traded for like a first-round pick. Do you remember that? Like
Mm-hmm.
in our Rewinders league, he got traded for Jaden Reed. I'm not just spitballing here. These are actual things that have happened. Right now, if I have Sam Darnold, I want Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins actually played a couple games last year and did decently. Even if he threw 4 interceptions, he still scored like 17 fantasy points because he's just a gunslinger. If I have Joe Burrow, I want Jake Browning. If I have Caleb Williams, I actually want Tyson Bagent. If I have Jared Goff, I want Hendon Hooker. There are certain quarterbacks that fit in this mold. I can't sit here and tell you who the backup quarterback for the Chiefs is. I'm sure some of you can out there. I couldn't tell you who it is for the Bills. Those are not people that I'm actually targeting with this. But really, the cost here, Bob, is what makes me want to do this. It really costs you 4th or 5th round picks in certain leagues. There's no league. I would never make any of these trades for a 3rd round pick. Let me just put that out there. A lot of the reasons why I do certain things on these lists is because of the cost associated with whatever I'm talking about. It is very cheap to acquire your quarterback handcuffs right now. If you have deeper size rosters in your league, this to me is absolutely paramount with the enormous amount of quarterback injuries that we've seen the last few years. Not just the volume, but the caliber of players that we're missing. You're talking Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, just heavy hitters at the quarterback position, and you are left with a gaping hole in your quarterback or even your super flex spot. So this is something that I'm just doing across all my leagues, is at least trying to have my QB1 handcuff if it's somebody worth acquiring.
100% definitely agree with this. And as you noted, with trying to deal Sam Darnold to JJ McCarthy managers, and now that deal that you were trying to send a couple months ago, however long ago, is off the table, the price of brick goes up. The second any of these handcuffs get activated, like any handcuff, the price will go up. You're paying 4th and 5th round picks now. Depending on league format, these guys might be on waiver wires. And some guys that I like to target, a couple of these guys I just pulled off of our Rewinders waiver wire, Mason Rudolph, Josh Johnson, Lamar Jackson, and Mason Rudolph being Will Levis's backup. Right. And what I like to do, target players who get hurt or have had injury concerns in the past. Lamar Jackson has missed decent enough time down the stretch of seasons, and he's my quarterback 1 on that team. So I may as well handcuff him and try to get some points out of that position. And then also Mason Rudolph being Will Levis, somebody who I don't believe to have that long of a leash. And if everything goes well for Will Levis, yeah, he's probably going to keep his job and be great and whatever the case is. But if Will Levis ain't doing so hot, Mason Rudolph is a competent veteran. I'm not going to say he's a great veteran by any stretch of the imagination or anything like that, but somebody who could come in, pick up the pieces, work with the existing veterans that are there in the receiver room, and maybe do something with that offense. Another player who I think could do the same thing, Jimmy Garoppolo, suspended for the first handful of games, but backing up Matthew Stafford, a guy who has had injury concerns over the past couple of years and is currently banged up as well. These are just a few guys to add to your list of guys that I'm very interested in, not just if they're my quarterbacks, but if I just foresee a situation where these guys might need to be activated at some point. And like I said, I pulled some of these guys off waivers, and that's not going to happen in every league. Every league is different with how they deal with their waiver wires, but that is what I'm looking to do. And I'm still, after this mission impossible, trying to go buy Malik Nabers anywhere I can. I still have 0 shares. Was never really in a position to draft him in any of my drafts. If I was drafting him, I would have had to draft him over either Marvin Harrison or Caleb Williams. I can't do that, or I was too late in drafts where I was, more in that Rome Odunze, Brock Bowers, JJ McCarthy range, where I was never in the sweet spot for Malik Nabers. And Malik Nabers was one of my favorite prospects, if not my favorite prospect this rookie cycle. Not saying he's my best graded or best rated, whatever the case is. And at this point, my heart breaks not having a single share, but my time might be running out. With rookies every year, we try to emphasize the precaution or tempering expectations. Hey, these guys might not be what you want them to be year one. No matter how good they are, their offensive situations play a role. They're acclimating to a new league, a new difficult challenge, a new difficulty of strength of schedule, all that. Even some of the worst corners that they'll face in the NFL are better than some of the corners they faced, regardless of whatever conference division they came out of. Some of the NFL corners that are sticking around are better than any of the corners they face in college. So as much as I have some pessimism with Malik Nabers' rookie season, between Daniel Jones, just a rough shot offense to begin with, maybe we can kind of get back to 2022 Daniel Jones before the ACL injury and Brian Daboll's offense. And there's that possibility that it is rough and maybe that he's accessible at some point. But I have to acknowledge, with that same possibility, the opportunity or chance that exists on the flip side of that coin is that he's just really damn good off the rip, and that opportunity just doesn't come to buy him. So, I have to try to buy while there's still that thought of, well, who knows, because he hasn't touched the field yet in the regular season. Even if that, dip occurs, that rough start to a career occurs, you look at guys like Garrett Wilson, Drake London, whose value really hasn't moved that much. I mean, yes, they become quote unquote more accessible, which is important when you're trying to buy players. But if he shows any signs of life and isn't like injured or, God forbid, or just is like a Quentin Johnson, which I do not see that happening for Malik Nabers, much different players. But, if we're not on either ends of those spectrum, it's going to be tough either way. So looking at some completed trades, I wanted to digest how people are buying Malik Nabers because it hasn't worked for me yet. I've tried sending guys like Tank Dell plus Kenneth Walker, other running backs, picks, scenarios, whatever the case is. But looking into packaging to tier up to Malik Nabers, you're going to need a 25 first. You need something super sexy, something for the future, something that people are really excited about. And then you need another top 20 to 30 wide receiver. And these are looking at complete trades, by the way, for Malik Nabers via Dynasty Daddy. You need that 25 first. You need a top 20 to 30 wide receiver, maybe even in that 15 to 20 range too, like Brandon Ayuk. But then the list goes on. Some completed trades that have added 25 first to go get Malik Nabers, Brandon Ayuk, Keon Coleman, DK Metcalf, Ladd McConkey, which is wild, Zay Flowers, Jaden Reed, Michael Pittman, and somebody I'm thinking of, maybe a Tank Dell, somebody who I'm a little lower on, and somebody else I just threw into the mix here that I happen to see not a wide receiver, but Will Levis was also included. Now, I have no idea where those 25 firsts are looking. They could all be projected early first. They could all be projected in the top 1 to 3, and that kind of throws things off. But maybe those are your ones where it seems way off base, where it's like Ladd McConkey plus a first for Malik Nabers should just probably never happen unless that first is really early and very solidly early. But you're going to need something along that ilk to get it done. I do struggle personally putting a whole first alongside Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman, and DK Metcalf without getting a second or even a third round pick back. Some players that were traded straight up for Malik Nabers if you want to try to go that route. And I thought maybe going from the top down, tiering down to Malik Nabers might be easier. I don't know that it really is because he's just so highly valued. And then you get into the conversations of, what's that team's trajectory and things of that sort. Do you have pathways that work for both sides here, but some straight up trades? Jahmyr Gibbs, AJ Brown, Puka Nacua, Christian McCaffrey. And I can't say I do any of these. Christian McCaffrey is certainly a maybe if I'm in the scenario of, hey, I'm not really looking to compete anymore. I just want to pivot off of McCaffrey. I think I'd be willing to do that. But what do you think about buying Malik Nabers? Do you have any advice to help me? I'd love to hear in the comments too. I'm going to challenge you guys. How can I buy Malik Nabers? What can I give up to go get Malik Nabers? You have Malik Nabers on your roster. How can I get him off your roster? Because I need him. Zach, tell me how I can go get this man on my roster one way or another. What do I got to do?
Well, I guess let me ask you a question first. Let's ask a clarifying question.
Sure.
Are you buying Malik Nabers to try and compete in 2024?
That is a great question, and no, I'm not.
Okay. So then I'm waiting for a window. I'm not buying now and spending these assets that you're saying that, at least in the short term, to me have a higher ceiling than what, and it has nothing to do with Malik Nabers and everything to do with Daniel Jones or Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito. It just has nothing to do with Malik Nabers. It's the same thing as Garrett Wilson the last 2 years. This has nothing to do with Garrett Wilson. It's Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle and everybody else that's been there. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I'm waiting for that JSN window or that Drake London window or the Garrett Wilson window that has existed over the past few, heck, even the Chris Olave window. We've seen people get frustrated with him not being the wide receiver wide receiver one that he's been projected to be. Been very good, but hasn't been the wide receiver one that we all thought he could be. So that's what I'm doing. I'm not trying to spend premium assets at this point in time. I'm waiting for 2, 3, 4, 5 bad weeks or an injury. That's what I'm doing, because to buy him now at the cost of the players that you listed in almost every scenario would make my team, in my opinion, lesser in 2024. And so I don't want to do that. I want to do it when it's cost efficient and it doesn't necessarily, or maybe it just doesn't hurt my team as much in a competitive window.
So what you're saying is I have to wait till the next startup to go get Malik Nabers, more than likely.
I'm just waiting for a buy window. It doesn't have to be in the next startup draft. There is going to be a point in this season or the offseason where Malik Nabers owners are frustrated with what they saw in 2024.
I hope so, Zach. I need a share of Malik Nabers at some point this season. So things I need or don't need. Moving on to the next segment here. This was an interesting one. I don't know if we've ever had this player come up in any segment in the history of this channel, like intentionally dedicated to this player, maybe debuting, and not as a rookie, as a old man, long time in the league, long in the tooth. So I give you points for that. It was definitely some shock and awe of some kind. I don't know, Zach. I give you props for being outside the box in this one, but I want to hear your take. I want to hear your thoughts. What do you got for your trade target here?
It's going to be Taysom Hill. This might not be that popular. I'm just going to start with this. There's nothing that you can say to refute this. 3 of the past 4 years, Bob, he has been a tight end 1. Nothing you can say to refute that. 2 of those years, a top 10 tight end. And you know what? It looks like they're going to use him even more. I don't know if you're watching or listening to what the Saints are saying, but oh my God, this might be the year of the Taysom Hill. On July 27th, I'm going to read you a straight quote. We very, very rarely do this, but it's really important that you hear what the coach is saying. Dennis Allen, who also poo-pooed Kendrick Miller. Dennis Allen said, quote, he's going to do a lot of stuff. He's going to run routes from inline, out wide, out of the backfield. He's going to block. He's going to run the ball from the backfield. I see him as a guy that's going to do a ton of different stuff. He's going to line up at the quarterback position at some point in time. I mean, he basically said he's going to line up in every single offensive position. And what has he done so far in the preseason? Well, he's pretty much lined up at every single offensive position you could possibly imagine. In 6 snaps in the preseason opener, all with the starters, 2 out wide, 2 in line, 1 at the running back, and 1 in the slot. So everything Dennis Allen said came to fruition in the first preseason game. Second preseason game, 64% of the snaps with the starters, 5 carries, 21 yards, and a touchdown. He's going to get goal line work, Bob. I'm gonna present you with a question, and hopefully you didn't see the answer in the show sheet. Give me your best guess as to the ratio of Alvin Kamara carries inside the 10-yard line to Taysom Hill carries inside the 10-yard line.
I've already seen it, so I won't spoil it. And still,
this is in the last 2 years, by the way. The last 2 seasons, it's 1-to-1. 30 carries for Alvin Kamara inside the 10. 30 carries for Taysom Hill. Here's what I got. I got a guy on Sleeper that I can play at the quarterback position. I can play at the tight end position. You are taking a gamble when you do that. You are taking a risk. You are hoping for a spike week, and there will be weeks where he doesn't do anything. That's just the Taysom Hill, the journey of the Taysom Hill. Guess what? If you don't have a top 3-4 tight end, there's going to be weeks where you get nothing out of your tight end. It just happens. That's the nature of the tight end position. But what does it cost to get Taysom Hill? Jelani Woods, a 3rd or 4th round pick, Blake Watson, Jake Browning. These are all trades in the last 7 days on Dynasty Daddy within the 2 preseason games that Taysom Hill played. I traded for Taysom Hill in my home league. I traded a 3rd round pick, and I got Taysom Hill and a 4th back. It was a no-brainer just for me to have a little bit of flexibility. I can slot him in 2 positions. He can. I'm not relying on him to be a starter. Let me make that abundantly clear. In a game where our rosters at week 14 and 15 never look like they do at week 1, Taysom Hill is a player that can give you a flex start, a bye week fill-in, an injury fill-in. God forbid you have 2 or 3 quarterbacks, one of them goes down, and you don't have your quarterback handcuffs, as we talked about. Guess who you can slot in at the quarterback position? These are all just flexible options that you can have that do not cost you anything. He's 34 years old. He's not a long-term dynasty asset. So this is obviously a competing acquisition. From what they're saying, from what other beat writers are saying about Taysom Hill's usage in training camp, and from the preseason usage in 2 games thus far, I don't see a way that Taysom Hill does not finish as a tight end 1 again. However that is, however that comes to fruition, I just don't see a scenario as long as he stays healthy.
Like I said, Zach, I don't really have anything to refute this, because as frustrating as he is to try to predict what, the weeks he's going to pop off, and that's the key here for me. That gives it my seal of approval of some status, I guess. That doesn't cost you much. You're not projecting him to be a starter for you anyway. He's a depth add. He's a break glass in case of emergency. Maybe there's a really good week ahead of you where, for some reason, Taysom Hill's a good matchup this week. I don't know what week that is going to be, and that's a great thing about the player, is he's going to keep the defense is guessing. I certainly have to go find a way to project Taysom Hill better, to find a way to project. He's definitely going to put my projection keys to a test, and all my equations and stuff. But if nothing else, Zach, like I said, I give you a lot of props for thinking outside the box with this one. Like I said, probably a debut. I don't think he's had his own dedicated segment as long as this channel has been in existence. If not, it's been a very, very long time. But with that said, we'll move on to my second trade target, or targets, I guess you could say. But I'm looking at cheap veteran running backs. And this is something we've been hammering this offseason, and we need to hammer more frequently. We're on the doorstep of the regular season. And I know if you're a competitive team, there's a good chance you are lacking a little bit in your running back room. Look no further than guys like James Conner, Alvin Kamara, Raheem Mostert, Joe Mixon, Tony Pollard, Devin Singletary, all valued outside of the top 20 running backs on Keep Trade Cut. But in my opinion, all of them have the ability to finish within the top 20. Tony Pollard is somebody who is the most on the fringe, Devin Singletary as well, but the others are pretty much locks for top 20 finishes. The big crux of dynasties, you always want to get the value out of your players. You want to squeeze the juice from the orange and get everything out of players that you can. But so many managers are too concerned about getting the value out of these players before their value dies in their roster. But here's the kicker. What so few managers realize is their trade value has already died. Their true value now lies within their production. It's something to hammer into your head. The value cliff comes before the production cliff. So the value dies, but these players are still kicking around. We see every single year there are productive older running backs. And don't get me wrong, there's a point where all wheels have to come off the bus. Fact of the matter is, it happens. But the value cliff comes well before the production cliff. So when the value cliff comes, when those running backs are on other teams, that's when you go buy them at their discounted costs. And so if you're looking to sell running backs at any point, sell them before they hit that value cliff, so you get maximum value, as opposed to selling now where you're not getting a super awesome return for what you're selling. Looking at some costs for these players, I don't think any of these guys should cost you more than a second round pick worth of value, maybe a touch more depending on the team and the availability of that player, the accessibility, what that team is trying to do. Obviously, if they're a competitive team and they want to stay competitive, you might not be able to get away with just sending a Adonai Mitchell, for example. Even though the value kind of shakes out, it's tough to pry them away at that point. But list of players that are similar range to these guys: Chris Godwin, Adonai Mitchell, Romeo Dobbs, Dontavian Wicks, Jalen Wright, Marquise Brown, Jamison Williams, Josh Palmer, Khalil Shakir, Zach Charbonnet. That's kind of a wide range, but there's a lot of buzz on some of these players. And at most, I think you add a future third to some of those players, and at worst, you are starting a conversation. And like I said, it always goes back to players want to get something out of these running backs because there's just an inherent fear that these running backs are just going to fall off a cliff. They're going to die. And to be fair, it's somewhat warranted. We see running backs, a Dalvin Cook, for an example, is a guy who just gone. Todd Gurley, another example, just basically gone and done. Guys that just fall off the wagon very quickly. There's not this steady, slow decline. It's this dude is done. So I get the concerns and I get that, but these cheap veteran running backs are just such good ways to flush out your roster. Again, not guys you're necessarily having to buy as running back one options, but they can put up running back 1 and 2 numbers for you very easily. Zach, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this concept as well. Some bargain bin shopping for some veteran running backs. Get them on your roster, get them in your lineups even, and not have to rely on rookies or other just unsure assets. These are high impact ads, in my opinion. Zach, what do you think?
So good, so true. And this is really the philosophy that I try to employ with most of my competitive teams. Is I usually don't go running back heavy superstar running backs. I try to buy the cheaper running backs. Even good examples of cheaper, more younger running backs is like a Brian Robinson or somebody I'm going to talk about in just a second. But I love this point. I've been on the Devin Singletary train forever this offseason. And a lot of that is the cost associated with it, which is what you're talking about. The value's already died. It's not very expensive to get a Devin Singletary. I think in my home league, I acquired him in the rookie draft, and I think we swapped a second and a third in the future, and I gave them a current 4th-round pick or something like that. It was something that was like, oh my God, yes. And then I drafted Tyrone Tracy right after it. So I was able to get the 2 of them. Love this point. This is how I really build my running back rooms on my more competitive teams, is just cheaper running backs. I'm okay with them in 2-3 years. If they just go away, it is what it is. As long as I get the production that I'm expecting. It is obviously a very big disappointment if I don't get the production that I'm expecting, but still that's also baked into the cost because you're not spending a first or even a 2nd-round pick in a lot of these instances. So love this point. This is a great one.
But with that said, Zach, you got one more to dive into here, and I love this pick. You ran it by me before the show, and I was all about it. A guy I was considering myself, but I figured I already talked enough running backs today. So, Zach, why don't you dive into this one?
It's going to be Isiah Pacheco, running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, running back 13 in 2023. His competition for carries, Bob: Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Deneric Prince, Carson Steele. A whole lot of nothing. No Jerick McKinnon. At least they haven't brought him back as of today, although McKinnon is 32 years old and has slowly declined over the last couple of years. But Isiah Pacheco, last year, 18.1 opportunities per game at 4.6 yards per carry. Finished as a running back 9 in fantasy points per game, weeks 3 through 13. So right up until your playoffs. Why did we stop it there? I'm going to tell you in just a second. He had only 50 targets last year, Bob, but he caught 88% of them, 44 receptions, had 24 in the last 4 games of the regular season. That's why that stat only went up to week 13. If you look at a snapshot of his last 10 games, Bob, including the playoffs, Isiah Pacheco saw 18 carries and 3.2 targets per game. That's 21 opportunities in 3 of the last 4 games in the postseason as well. 25 plus carries a game. Now, remember, those were cold weather games. It wasn't ideal throwing situations. Like the Dolphins game was like negative 10 degrees. So got a lot of carries. That's not something that necessarily translates to your fan. I don't want people buying Isiah Pacheco expecting 25 carries. I'm just giving you an example of how much they trusted him down the stretch of the season, that being the playoffs and the Super Bowl, so on and so forth. So it looks like he's in line for an increased usage in that offense. And when he was utilized in that offense last year, everything went phenomenal. Like you got great production for Isiah Pacheco, and I think it's going to get better even this year. Looked on Dynasty Daddy for some recent trades the last 7 days. A lot of what I saw, Bob, was 1st-round picks. I'm not comfortable doing that. I just want to make sure I'm very clear with that. I don't like trading my 1st-round picks for running backs that don't have any security, and that is Isiah Pacheco. As much as I am pretty sure he's going to have a good season as long as he's healthy, I don't like that. Is how you get in a very big hole in Dynasty. You make a trade like that, and the player gets hurt or the player falls off a cliff, and now you don't have your 1st-round pick, and you're probably in a bad spot because the player you acquired didn't do what you needed them to do. So I personally am not comfortable moving a 1st-round pick. I wouldn't even do a 1st-round pick and Isiah Pacheco for a second. I don't want to have that situation where I don't have my 1st-round pick for a player that has no security moving forward. I'm a big believer in if I'm acquiring a player with my 1st-round pick, that player needs to be secure in their job. And unfortunately, no day 3 running back is secure for a 1st-round pick. But some trades that I did see that I liked, I saw Isiah Pacheco for Pat Freiermuth. Get Arthur Smith's tight end 1 off of my team, please. I don't want any part of that. I don't know how Pat Freiermuth is high on these rankings. Arthur Smith hates tight ends. He loves the 2nd tight end on every team. So, yeah, get Pat Freiermuth off my team. I saw Isiah Pacheco for Jordan Addison. Sign me up for that one. I don't have to talk anymore about that. And then another one that was very interesting was Zach Charbonnet and a 2nd-round pick for Isiah Pacheco. I would do that. I feel comfortable moving a 2nd plus for Isiah Pacheco easily. And if it was a projected early 2nd, like if it wasn't mine, it was another team's, I would do that too. If it was my projected early 2nd, then I don't want to do that. I'm not buying a running back to be on a team that's going to suck. So, again, I'm not comfortable with the 1st-round picks because I did see a lot of those. And look, when we do this segment, we want to be honest with what we're seeing on recent trades. I saw that's probably the trade I saw the most was a 2025 first for Isiah Pacheco. I'm not comfortable doing that, but I did see a lot of other trades. I felt good. I felt good pulling the trigger on because of the player I was getting back in return.
Yeah, there's a lot of security in that first round pick, Zach. So I can't blame you one bit. Whereas, there's so many players that are on that fringe value of like a first and a second round pick. We talked about this pre-show. Isiah Pacheco 100% fits that bill, but you just feel better moving another one of those players that's worth in between a first and second round pick, because that player's value can kind of fluctuate however, but the pick value we know is going to increase, and it kind of just helps you keep the youth flowing on your roster as opposed to possibly sinking it into a running back who I believe in at this point has had good production the first 2 years of his career, despite being a 7th round pick in the NFL draft. Looking at my projections, which you can get at patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, in the gold tier, I have him slotted in as my running back 8, in tier 4 between running backs 5 and running back 9. So he's up there. I am projecting him for a nice season. He has a good offense around him, a good offensive system. They've added some weapons to that team, which should actually help him because, with proven wideouts around him, granted, half more banged up or possibly going to be suspended, whatever the case is. One of them is super small and Xavier Worthy and just gets pushed around all over the place. That is not meant to be a slight, but it is. We've seen a lot of that in the preseason footage, getting pushed around a little bit. I'd like Xavier Worthy still a good bit, but he's just going to have to be used right to get the full potential out of him. But either way, like Isiah Pacheco a good bit, big in on these values. Even I do tend to lean towards liking Pat Freiermuth, even though I know we have Artie Smith in town. I have lulled myself into a false sense of security with that for sure. But Jordan Addison, like you've been low on him all offseason. And Zach Charbonnet for me is just such a clear handcuff that it's like, fine, get him off my roster. I don't know why anybody would really want this deal unless they felt Pacheco was really just worth a second round pick. And Charbonnet was a handcuff to Kenneth Walker for them already. Whatever the case is, I like these deals a good bit, Zach. Jaden Reed was another name we threw out. I think that one would probably get a lot of people. That would probably be because I think he's a little higher value than anybody on this list. I think he also falls into that late first, early second round of pick value. So that's another one you could throw in here, and I think you'd probably get a deal done if you wanted to get more security in your running back room versus depth in your wide receiver room. But Zach, with all that said, that's going to be it for this one today. We do hope y'all enjoyed the video. Please leave a like if you did. Comment down below some of your favorite trade targets, which of these you liked, which of these you enjoyed. And we want to see you over in that Discord, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get over there for a free 7-day trial. Get your roster reviewed as well. Check out the pinned comment and the YouTube description box below. But with all that said, Zach, all the promo in the books, we are going to get the heck on out of here. We will see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.